Hello, I'm Jenny Ford, Director of Client Success at Paradigm Personality Labs. We are here today to talk to you about norm groups. John Lipinski, our Chief Research and Innovation Officer, and Lisa Dunbar, our CEO, we're going to share some information. You probably remember talking about norm groups during your certification process, so this will be somewhat of a refresher and somewhat of a deep dive into the topic. John?
Thanks, Jenny. One question that often pops up with norm groups is if I have a certain score, and let's say it's from using the US norm group, for example, and then I scored it using a different norm group, for example, the UK or Sweden or the global norm group, how big of a difference would I actually see in those scores? And that's a good question. When we actually dig a little bit deeper, we see that the differences in the final norm scores tend to be fairly small. So for example, let's imagine we have a person. This is an absolutely average person. They are average on every single score. That is, they get a 50 for each of the 23 subtraits. If we looked across those 23 subtraits, we could ask ourselves, okay, let's suppose this person got a 50 for each of the 23 subtraits, scored with the US norm group. What would the same person like? What would those norm scores look like if they, for example, use the UK norms instead? And actually what you find is the differences tend to be really small. The max difference there is about 4 points. And for the most part, the differences are more along the lines of 2-3 points for someone that's in the middle. You will see some potentially larger differences for scores that are more in the extremes, but there's really nothing in using the norm groups. There's really no qualitative shifts in the kinds of scores, so they tend not to have a huge impact. We've done the same kind of analyses with all sorts of different groups, and that same general pattern of small differences, but no real qualitative shifts on the scores just tends to recur over and over again. That might lead to the question of, well, why do you have different norm groups? And we do offer a host of different norm groups. We've also found, just based on client conversations, that oftentimes, very reasonably so, people who are in different parts of the world want to really understand who it is that they're being compared to. And sometimes we found that people are simply more receptive knowing that their particular score and their norm group is being normed to a sample or a population with which they're more familiar. So bottom line, differences aren't huge, but they're there. And we're happy to entertain questions regarding them if there are any follow-ups. Lisa, did you have a couple of extra things you wanted to add there?
Yeah, so also I'd like for you to consider that norm groups are not a proxy for describing a culture, and we shouldn't take them as such. But what they are is they provide precision and psychometric validation of a personality assessment or instrument's ability to consistently operate across groups. It also demonstrates to audiences that the assessment, that Paradigm takes their unique group into consideration. Some questions that we often get asked from clients are, how do you select a norm group? So you have to, first of all, consider the individual and or the group within the context. For example, do you have a working group you're working on a team session with that is comprised of people in many geographies, a remotely distributed geography? Likely for that team, you would run a teamer report, for example, or group insights report with global norms, and then maybe both run the individual reports in global norms and the respective norms for their geography. For an expatriate working in another country with a large group of nationals, you'd likely run that for the norms of that country. Let's say it's Germany. You could also then run for the expatriate if they ask that back in their respective national norms. You'd also want to consider how long someone has been living in the country in which they're doing work. Just because someone is not a born national in a country doesn't mean that you should always offer norms for their country of origin. It's about the time living. So there is some nuance to it. If your country's not represented within our norm groups, and we do have a broad offering, in general, use global, but again, it's nuanced. And if you have any questions, always ask us. I think that's all that we have for today, Jenny. I think we've covered it in pretty good detail, and I think you're going to offer some resources for where people can learn more.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Lisa and John. If you would like to dig deeper into the numbers of the norm groups or other information, what norm groups are offered by Paradigm, have a look in the practitioner's toolbox on your My Paradigm dashboard, and you will see the technical manual has a ton of information about the various norm groups. Of course, we're always happy to answer questions. You can reach our client engagement team at any time, and they'll help filter those questions and get those to the right people. Thank you so much.